The case against capital punishment is making headway at a function hosted by the French foreign minister to mark the 10th World Abolish the Death Penalty Day. Lawyers highlighted how 21 nations still put their own citizens to death in 2011. Now you can compare that with 31 one decade ago. Still, nearly 700 executions last year. Activists say you can more than double that number when you include China, which doesn't give statistics, also keen to kill their own citizens, Iran, and then there's the likes of Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and also the United States, the only Western nation that applies the death penalty. Even though more than 18,000 Americans remain on death row, polls do indicate, however, that support is steadily waning, with abolition on the ballot in California next month. 31 years after abolition in France, the death penalty here, you could say, is something of a non-issue. But how you punish inmates remains controversial, with a justice system which metes out some of the longest prison sentences inside of the EU. The future of punishment, the future of the death penalty. Today in the France 24 debate, is it soon the end of the death penalty? And with us to talk about, we have Céline Bardet, the author of Zones Sensibles, sensitive area, I guess is how you would...
I have no clue how to translate
that.
How do you
translate it? It's on her experience tracking war criminals in the former Yugoslavia. Thank you for being with us. Also with us, Éric Bernard, lawyer, spokesperson for Together Against the Death Penalty.
Hello.
How are you? And Avi Biton, human rights attorney as well, is with us. And from Washington, Richard Dieter, executive director of the Death Penalty Information Center. Welcome to you. The France 24 debate, where you can always weigh in on the conversation on Facebook. And on Twitter, you can find us at François F24. So here in Paris Tuesday evening, I think we have two of our guests here present who were at that reception. The foreign minister, Laurent Fabius, beginning that reception against death penalty by reading out a message of support from the UN Secretary General. Laurent Fabius, who himself was a junior cabinet member when France abolished the death penalty way back in 1981.
The death penalty is inhumane. It is in essence a violation of human rights. It's not justice. Rather, it represents the failure and denial of justice.
Let me begin, if you will, with Richard Dieter in Washington. And Richard, you're hard-pressed in Paris to find people who are for the death penalty. How do you feel when you see that?
Well, I think that the United States is going to be seen in a historical sense as very much in line with the movement around the world to do away with the death penalty. It's a little hard to see right now because we have executions every year. We have a lot of people on death row. But that is not the whole picture of the United States. 5 states of our 50 states abolished the death penalty in the past 5 years. So we now have 17 states that have ended capital punishment. California is about to take a vote in November that would take 700 people off of death row. Executions are down, death sentences are down. So public opinion, although not the same as in France or other European countries, is changing here in the U.S.
Is there any argument in this day and age for the death penalty? The question we put on the France 24 debate Facebook page. Rory answered, not when they execute the wrong people, even in this age of DNA. Bruno from Nantes in France wrote, the only way to explain the death penalty is by the irrational side of men based on primitive thoughts. If the death penalty worked, criminality would have ended in these countries where it existed. However, not everyone agrees. John writes that if a killer is likely to kill again, then kill him. If killing someone prevented him from harming me or mine, I'd have no objection at all. And it's a minority opinion, Éric Bernard, but it's not that much of a minority opinion in Europe. And every time that there's a gruesome murder, the people who think the same way as John speak out again.
Yes, in other countries in Europe, always. I don't know what could be a referendum, a vote in France. I think now the majority would be against the death penalty, which was not the case in the opinion in 81, even if we always think at that time there was about 75% for the death penalty, but it was a more democratic issues we chose. That means the election of the deputies took place, and it was against the death penalty.
Do you agree, Avi, that you're sort of going against public opinion when you're against the death penalty often, even today?
When you are a politician, you have to be brave to abolish death penalty. As it was said in 1981, when the French Minister of Justice passed this law abolishing death penalty, the majority, according to all polls, the majority of French citizens were for the death penalty.
And now, today, majority are possibly against the death penalty in France, but we're not sure, even now. And every time there's a gruesome murder, again, this issue comes up.
Well, my feeling is that today it's a non-issue, but it's difficult to say what would be the outcome of a poll, because there are no poll on this question in France now.
On Twitter, real estate magnate / TV personality / former Republican presidential hopeful Donald Trump tweeted, "Got to do something about these missing children grabbed by perverts, too many incidents, fast trial, death penalty." That's what he's advocating. Another man who chased the Republican nomination for president is the current governor of Texas. Here's what he had to say during a debate during the primaries.
If you come into our state and you kill one of our children, you kill a police officer, you are involved with another crime and you kill one of our citizens, you will face the ultimate justice in the state of Texas, and that is you will be executed.
What do you make of
when you listen to that, Richard Dieter, you just heard a moment ago Avi Beaton say it's a non-issue in France. Is it true to say that in Texas it's a non-issue, but the other way?
Well, I think it is an issue in Texas, although it's not a big issue in the presidential debate. And, I think as evidence of that, Rick Perry is nowhere to be seen. He's not someone that the candidates turn to. He didn't get the nomination. So in a way, on a national level, the death penalty is not a big debate. Certainly, it is an issue in Texas. But it's an issue that used to be a consensus for the death penalty. Texas death sentences have dropped by about 60%. They used to have as many as 40 death sentences in a year. Last year it was 8. Executions are also down. They are having an innocence commission to root out cases of mistake. I mean, they still support the death penalty. They will lead the country in executions.
And back in August, they executed a man who was mentally deficient, Marvin Wilson. Why did they do that?
Well, we have a law that says you can't execute people who are mentally retarded. You can't execute people who are completely insane. But mental illness, which is a big, broad class, is not a bar to the death penalty. So it's not that everyone agreed that Marvin Wilson had mental retardation. There was a dispute about whether he fit the definition. And yes, the execution went forward with some doubts about that. But and people aren't violating the law. It's a question of how the law should be interpreted. I'm trying to be defensive in a way of Texas. I think there's a lot of things wrong with the death penalty in Texas, and that's why the U.S. as a whole does not want to be like Texas. You heard that applause for Rick Perry. That's not where the country is. That was a select group of Republican stalwarts at a convention-like atmosphere. Most people have real doubts about the death penalty in the U.S.
In the U.S., there's at the same time still the death penalty. There's also an incarceration rate, which has spiked dramatically in the past few decades. The death penalty down, sentences getting longer and longer since the 1980s. When you look at this, at those numbers, what's your reaction, Céline Marnet?
I don't know, but I mean, I wanted to react first when we say that in France, for example, it's a non-issue. I'm not that sure it's such a non-issue. You know, it's not an issue because now it's done, and in France we cannot come back in that. In Europe we cannot. But when you talk with people, and especially when you mention the issue of, you know, gross murder or pedophilia, then you have people coming back. It was very interesting, also this thing with Rick Perry. I think it has a lot to do also with emotion. And this is where people get emotional and then get into this kind of revenge and things. So when it comes to the U.S., I agree also. There is a move in the U.S. and you have this move for you know, toward the abolition. More and more people are talking about that. So I think it's a good step ahead.
And there's quite a gulf between France and the United States on this issue.
Well, and you know, in the U.S., I mean, I've been there a few years ago, and actually I was in Texas. And talking about death penalty in Texas is something, you know, very challenging. But it's part of, you know, in the U.S. it's part of their life, the death penalty, but there are discussion, and I fully agree with this. I mean, the Americans, they are not that much of, you know, for the death penalty when you talk with people. So this is something that has to be reflected also and supported.
All right, we mentioned the United States and the numbers there. The Chinese don't provide statistics on the number of executed inmates. But this goes in the sense of what Richard Dieter was saying a few minutes ago. The official People's Daily claims the number of killings have been curbed, that the criminal law stipulates now that the death penalty shall only be applied to criminals who have committed extremely serious crimes, and sets strict conditions on application. After China abolished the death penalty for 13 economy-related nonviolent offenses in 2011, only 55 offenders received the death penalty. Eric Bernard, do you see this trend in China where it is waning as well?
It is. There is a trend for the direction of the abolition in China, yes. Now there is a debate. There are abolitionists in China, and the debate is going up in China. Also, the government in China is moving very, very, very slowly in the good direction. But there are still between 5,000 and 10,000 people executed every year. They use it also to sell the heart, the organs. That is very horrible. But there is a move in that direction, yes.
Avi Beaton, one of our producers was speaking with a Chinese citizen earlier, and who was saying how over there, it's just not the same notion of punishment and forgiveness that there is in the West. And you can't impose Western notions of justice on China. And that, for them, well, there just isn't the same notion of justice. It just doesn't work the same.
Well, I would just reply by giving the example of a small, poor African country, the Rwanda. In Rwanda, more than a decade ago, there was a genocide which killed 1 million of citizens. And still, in this country, where we are currently sentencing mass murderers, the death penalty has been abolished in Rwanda. So it's not a Western country, it's not a developed country. There were the most serious crimes there, genocide, and still they have abolished death penalty.
But that's in Rwanda. Perhaps it's a different case in China.
Well,
I mean, are the notions that we have of what's fair, what's right, universal?
That's the tricky question. That's a very good question, but I'm not sure. It's not. Yes, there are some that are universal. That's what I believe, and so I think this is where the limit is, because I don't think that it's a good argument or to fire back saying, and that's most of the time what is used to say, we have a different culture or we have a different way of looking at justice. I don't think it's a good argument.
And Céline Bardet, when you were doing your work in the Balkans, was that an argument that they tried to use against you, saying, well, you don't understand the way things work over here?
That's always, yeah, of course. I'm coming back from Libya, for example, but in the Balkan it was the same. And then now we were mentioning the massive crime, or when we talk about war crimes, it's people, yes, when people are under emotion and they have been through difficult things, I'm talking about the people in the street, of course they ask for revenge and of course they ask for death penalty. At the moment, the son of Gaddafi, there is discussion about his trial, and if you talk to Libyan people, what they tell you is we just want it to be executed. So again, I think the work of the justice is to go beyond that, and that's what justice is doing. But it's always a difficult argument. What is justice for people in different parts of the world? That's different. But my experience is that when you talk with victims and you realize more and more, and many victims, they are not that much preoccupied by the sentence and then be it death penalty. They are preoccupied by the fact that whatever happened to them is recognized, qualified, and this is what matters for them to feel a kind of reparation. So I don't think that the death penalty is that much of seen as a solution for people.
All right. What is justice is a topic that we'll be getting back to in the second part. We'll also talk more about the case of Libya. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.